Welcome back, everybody. I'm sorry that I did not have as much content this weekend. I probably will try to space it out a little more evenly throughout the week. Um, this series I've been doing on Year of the Rat, which again, and I'll include the link later. I didn't include it this time, but I'll include the link to this book, Year of the Rat, which is probably the most egregious display of crime at the top of the Clinton administration that you could probably get. And if you want to talk about the real scandals that happened in the Clinton administration, it's remarkable that people who are so obsessed with collusion today, they weren't paying attention in 1990 to what was happening with regards to the Clinton administration's relationship with China. So, excuse me. You know, it's a shame to do this late, but it did take a little prep on the part of myself to put this together. I've been putting together presentations for every part of this series, and the bottom line of this whole series, and I've been making the point every time, and I've been trying to make it on other videos I do, is that the real collusion was between Bill Clinton and China. And it's I wouldn't say that they're the only country that colluded with them, but when you see the just variety of different links that were between him and Chinese government actors, people who had direct commercial ties to China, the whole narrative that develops about Donald Trump and Russia and Putin just looks kind of childish by comparison. Russia does have a lot of links to certain movements around the globe, particularly in Europe. They do have an agenda to weaken the European Union, but it doesn't rise to the level of sophistication that the Chinese operation did under Bill Clinton. And I think that it really shows a lack of respect and intelligence on the part of the U.S. media that they didn't explore this to the depth that they did. Respect towards the American public, because for them, I think that they can rely on what they think are the responsible adults. They think that there's somebody in the Oval Office who will look after the interests of national security, whether or not they are reporting stories that could harm the United States or not. They don't really care if American interests are harmed by some sort of operation like we saw with China. So I would say, if you're one of these people that believes that that we haven't been infiltrated by foreign agents in the past, then you should probably pay attention to this series and pay attention to some. I didn't include the links to the other parts, but I will add them later. This is part 3. I urge you to go back and look at the other 2 parts. And I think, for example, I have a couple viewers from Australia and New Zealand who are, they're very nice. They come and they view my content. And I make a lot of jokes on my other videos and whatever, and it's a lot of fun. I kind of take this a little more seriously just because it's kind of breathtaking. Not because I'm trying to make you guys not have fun, but if you think about it, we had a president who literally sold national security to China in exchange for campaign donations in the 90s, and it and nobody cared about it. Nobody cared about it then. People don't care about it now. I've been trying to get other creators to pay attention to it. And I do contribute some stuff to the Hard Bastard Network. I'm going to try to get them to pay a little more attention to it, talk to me a little more about it. I'm willing to go on their shows, But that might not even be necessary. The point is not to talk about. It's not to have me present it. The point is that people should be talking about it. And the fact that people have not been talking about the China collusion, I've been making overtures to H.A. Goodman and to Anthony Logan, who does let me talk about it on his show. But people don't realize that if the same standards were applied to the Bill Clinton case in 1998 that are being applied to the Donald Trump case, Bill Clinton would have probably been convicted within a few days because the evidence is so overwhelming. There's receipts, there's campaign donations, there was money returned. Okay, there were officials that there were indictments against officials that donated money. There were federal cases. There was a commerce secretary who died in the course of this saga. There's that in and of itself. That's another story. But he was involved deeply in this. So I take this seriously enough that I try not to make it kind of as much of a joke as other videos I do, because I think it really is a big deal. I mean, maybe if this is a joke, then national security is a joke. Pinochet, hello. Thanks for tuning in. I hope some more people will tune in. I hope you guys share this video and share the other parts of this series wherever you can, because people have to start to understand that the real collusion was between Bill Clinton and the People's Republic of China. So let's begin. I have the third presentation. So this whole introduction was in order to let at least a couple people climb in and grab your seats. I think most of you guys are probably old hands. Angel, good evening. Thanks for tuning in, buddy. Angel, remember that the real collusion was between China and Bill Clinton. So we're going to focus on this presentation, and once in a while I'll try to focus a little more on and just read from the book itself. So here you go. This is part 3. The book, of course, is Year of the Rat by Edward Timberlake and William Triplett II. So here's an interesting detail, and I included the link. It says in February 1992, Representative Nancy Pelosi, Democrat of California. This is way before she became Speaker of the House or, Democratic Minority Leader, which is her natural position, warns that the People's Republic of China intelligence is attempting to donate to members of Congress. And she added the fact that this may not be election related. Now, I have the article here. It says, Representative Nancy Pelosi, citing credible sources, said Wednesday she has information that the Chinese government has attempted to make contributions to members of Congress through intermediaries. Pelosi repeatedly emphasized that the elected officials had no way of knowing the true source of the funds, only that they were to have come from persons or groups sympathetic to the People's Republic of China. She later said there is no evidence of anybody falling for the bait. The allegations surfaced at the House Appropriations Subcommittee hearing on the Justice Department's budget request. Pelosi told Attorney General William Barr that she understood that the department had the information and asked whether it was investigating. So his reply was, if I did have the information, it's the kind of thing I would not be discussing, Barr said. Pelosi, a leading congressional critic of China's human rights policies, asked if Barr could at least acknowledge that the department has received the allegations. So Barr said, I'd rather not do it in this forum, Barr said, suggesting they might be able to respond if Pelosi detailed the allegations in a letter. So to put it mildly, what Pelosi was doing was not necessarily because she cared about U.S. national security with regards to China. Remember that Nancy Pelosi, her constituency is the San Francisco Bay Area. I think it's Marin County, California. there's a large Chinese exile population there, including several, at least a substantial community that was, opposed to the Tiananmen Square protest, suppression of it. Not opposed to the protests, but opposed to the suppression of the protests. So for them and for her, it was kind of a good way to show up for the constituents and say, look, I care about what's going on in China. I care about the human rights abuses, and I care about national security. In reality, you'll see that there was very little follow through on this whole angle. So, I'll take questions on that later if I have a little time. I'm not trying to make this super super long, but let's keep going. Sorry if I have to, bump back and forth. But this is Charlie Tree. Kind of a funny name if you look at it, but but in 1996, as the People's Republic of China threatened Taiwan with missile attacks. Remember, Taiwan is considered by the rest of China to be a renegade province, so that's the motivation there. So Yalin, or Charlie Tree's relationship with Bill Clinton kicked in. Tree was a Chinese immigrant triad gang member and restaurant owner in Little Rock, Arkansas. Those of you that don't know, the triads are they're a Western name for a number of Chinese organized crime organizations that are, there's actually a lot of them around the world. So he was a full made member of one of them, the Four Seas Triad gang. According to the LA Times, Tree and Clinton would embrace like lost brothers upon meeting. So I include the link to that article. So if you follow the link to this, and unfortunately I kind of copied over the link to the presentation to the last part. So the last part you'll only be able to see available on video. I'm sorry about that. That's my mistake. But there's an LA Times article talking about that, how Bill Clinton had such a deep relationship with a guy who was a made member of a Chinese crime family, and they'd embrace like lost brothers because they were both, Tree lived in Arkansas. He owned a restaurant there. So Clinton, also on page 109, this is a guy who will come up again and again. Secretary of the Defense William Perry. He preferred initially that there would be no response at all to the Chinese missile bracketing of Taiwan. So what happened there was that at a certain point in I think, yes, this was in 1996, China was using ballistic missiles to bombard Taiwan at either end of the island to show, yes, we have enough weapons to blow this island to smithereens if they continue to talk about full-on independence, seceding entirely from China and calling Taiwan an independent country. As of right now, Taiwan is called the Republic of China. They call themselves a part of China, even though their government does not submit to Beijing. So in 1996, the rest of the Chinese government, or the People's Republic of China, they decided we're going to bring them into line. We're going to bracket the island with missiles. So Secretary of Defense Bill Perry was of the mind that, well, why jeopardize the growing trade between the U.S. and China and risk an international situation? Why should we get involved? It's not like we have a treaty of friendship with Taiwan. Well, I mean, they actually did have a treaty of friendship and a defense treaty with Taiwan. So it was sort of a scandal that he really didn't want to do anything, and the scandal just thickened because Charlie Tree ended up having a role in this, which we'll show you in a second. So on March 26, 1996, Clinton replies to Tree's letters that he received through Mark Middleton. Mark Middleton, you might remember, was known as a middleman. Mark Middleton was a middleman for the Riadi family's campaign contributions. So here's on page 115. He reassures Tree that the redeployment of U.S. vessels to Taiwan was not a threat to China. He placed Tree on the U.S. Commission to Improve Relations with China, and this is on page 244, which I'll read in a second. And Hillary Clinton feigned ignorance of Tree in an April 4th, 1996 meeting at the White House, calling him a Little Rock restaurateur. She neglects to mention him sitting at the head of a donors table for people with who had made contributions of up to $250,000. So that's how duplicitous they were. You're talking about somebody. Ask yourself the question: you're the president of the United States. What do you care? Even though he might be like a personal friend, what do you care what this restaurant owner from Arkansas has to say about Chinese American relations? Right? You know, writing this letter in actually in broken English. I mean, good for him writing, but why would he have to reply to a guy who basically is a private citizen, has nothing to do with with foreign policy, supposedly, and he writes him a full reply letter. So, let me see here. So, here is the Tree report on improving relations to China. It says, in formulating such a gigantic policy as U.S. Asia trades, he began, I think we should logically and systematically think and manage in 6 dimensions, such as 1 time, 2 space, 3 subject, 4 people, 5 methods, 6 target. Or, he continued at the same peak of insight, we can alternatively proceed them in the terms of 5 W's and 1 H, such as what methods, targets, tactics, what industries, what variables, culture, key to successful factors, where, which nations, which territory, when, short term, midterm, long term, or no, when, who to implement, big industries, medium, small to achieve our increased surplus, which, similar to what, which programs to promote, how to implement, and so on for 3 interminable pages. So it was basically a bunch of gibberish, and it was. And I've written some things in my time that maybe weren't the best presented, and were kind of there to be, just what do they call it? Like a paper, a snow job, they used to call it. Pinochet says the triads will kill you hard. I'm sure they will. So basically, Charlie Tree was a middleman, just like Mark Middleton was a middleman for some of these Chinese companies to pass money to the DNC and to the Clintons. That's basically why he was able to get any attention from the Clintons at all. The whole thing with the commission and whatever, that Bill Clinton didn't need a commission in order to manage his relations with China. Bill Clinton was perfectly capable of conducting U.S. policy with foreign countries without the need for a guy like Charlie Tree. He was that, and that's one of the things. Bill Clinton was capable, using some of his persuasive abilities, to get a number of agreements. Some of them long term didn't work out, such as the Good Friday Accord is kind of falling apart now in Northern Ireland. And then there was the Dayton Agreement with Bosnia. So it's not like he didn't know how to deal with foreign countries, and he was a better diplomat than some of the people working for him. Madeleine Albright, for example, what accomplishments did she have as a foreign policy leader? Almost nothing. So he's going to trust some sort of commission headed by a restaurant owner from Little Rock to improve relations with China? I don't think so. I think it was a huge lie, basically. So after this, so it's hard to really manage this whole presentation and the description of this book and the saga by topic, but we kind of move from civilian collusion to actual collusion with members of the Chinese military. So in 1996, Colonel Liu Chaoying, the daughter of General Liu Haoqing, made direct political contributions to Clinton-Gore 96. The elder Liu was the highest-ranking officer of the People's Liberation Army of the People's Republic of China, and his daughter was an operative of military intelligence arm Kostin and its commercial arm KSIL. Through these organizations, the People's Republic of China was able to assist Pakistan in gaining ballistic missile capabilities by the end of Clinton's term. So the woman depicted in this picture, or pictured with Bill Clinton, is not, it's not Liu Chaoying. It's another lady named Helen Liu from Australia. She's Chinese Australian, and she actually, she was caught up in a different donation dust up later. This is according to the Sydney Morning Herald. Okay, so yeah, I'll show this to you. Chinese Australian political donor Helen Liu had close business and personal ties with a senior Chinese military intelligence operative at the same time as she was cultivating relationships with Australian Labor politicians. And what is so this is from 2017, and was the first direct link between a donor to Australian politics and an operative of a foreign intelligence service. Fairfax Media can reveal one of Helen Liu's Australian companies sent $250,025 to a Hong Kong company that American authorities believe was a front for Chinese espionage. The Hong Kong company was owned by Liu Chaoying, the daughter of China's most powerful military officer during the 1990s. Liu Chaoying was also a lieutenant colonel in China's army and the vice president of a Chinese company responsible for procuring missiles and satellite technology. Boom. So everything that happened in the 90s has continued till today. And nothing, it's almost as if the methods haven't changed. The people have changed very little. It's still, all it is just bringing in other actors, in this case, Australian politicians. The Clinton Defense Department tried to deflect criticism by claiming missiles were not operational. And then this wasn't like the first time that something like this happened with Colonel Liu's company, because in 1994, it was actually revealed that, or it wasn't revealed then, but her China National Precision Machinery Import-Export Corporation was exposed for selling C-802 ballistic missiles to Iran. So you can just see here, this is the Clinton administration basically giving free rein to Chinese intelligence agents to basically take American missile technology, which we'll get into more of that in a second, why it's American missile technology, and funnel it to other countries that end up wanting to create ballistic missile programs. Whether Pakistan, by the way, in 1999, I believe, they detonated their first nuclear weapon at the end of the Clinton presidency. So it's not as if these actions didn't have any repercussions. They directly led to the nuclear enablement of Pakistan, and to some degree, they helped create a ballistic missile program in Iran that is part of their continuing development of a nuclear weapon up until today. So then another episode that was interesting regarding the military, in August 1994, the Chinese Army General Xu Weizi, I don't know if I pronounced his name correctly, visits Washington, D.C. Xu was a key enforcer of the Chinese crackdown on Tiananmen Square protests of 1989. Secretary of Defense Bill Perry praised Xu during the visit, which included a 4-day vacation to Hawaii. In the Tiananmen Square protests, about 218 demonstrators died, according to official accounts, but up to 10,000 by other estimates. So, in the account, according to this book, Perry goes to the degree of saying, well, I had a great time being hosted by you guys in 1980 when President Carter sent me over to the Middle East. We can do a lot for China. We're going to share with you our strategy. This is on that page in the book, page 155. He goes and says, you know, we're going to have a deep relationship with China on the military level. That's very odd. I mean, why would we need to cooperate with China on the military on a military basis in the 90s or at any other time? I don't think we share many strategically common areas with China. In the 90s, especially not, because China was trying uh, to act against India. They were trying to act against Japan. China, they've developed into much more of a global rival to the U.S. than a friend. So a couple more pieces of content here. So we're going to talk a little about Sandy Berger. So Berger was the point person at the Hogan and Hartson law firm for the trade office of the Chinese government. This was according to Nancy Pelosi, quoted by Nat Hentoff in the Washington Post of January 26, 1997. Berger was key in removing export controls on satellite technology and facilitating the Loral Aerospace and Hughes Aerospace coordination with the People's Republic of China government. So basically, what happened was that China was trying to get ballistic missile technology that they were lacking in the 90s. They were launching rockets that continued to explode on takeoff, or they wouldn't make it all the way to the atmosphere if they were satellite rockets, or they just weren't reliable. Similar to the way we look at North Korea today. Thanks to engineers from one of our companies, Loral Space, I think Loral Space Holdings was what they were called. They don't exist anymore. And Hughes Aerospace, these U.S. companies were able to correct all of their errors. So thanks to our companies, China has a more reliable ballistic missile technology, capability now. It's kind of pathetic when you think about it. We gave them what they needed in order to threaten us, if they needed to threaten us. China hasn't threatened us as much as North Korea, but there's still a nuclear threat on the global level. So again, that's thanks to Sandy Berger. He removed a number of export controls that prevented that technology from being given to China. And we're living with the consequences of that till today. So what am I talking about there? I go into a little more depth at the end of the presentation. So, sorry. In March 1997, Chunhua Ye, he had a donation of $37,500 that was forced to be returned by the DNC. And Chun's bank was controlled directly by the People's Republic of China's scientific spying agency, COSTIN. That was the one that Liu Chiang basically was an agent for. So then on April 4th, 1998, Jeff Girth of the New York Times reveals that Loral Space Systems and Hughes Aerospace had cooperated to improve Chinese ballistic missile capabilities. Loral and Hughes chairman Bernard Schwartz and other employees and family were major Clinton Gore donors, and in 1994, Schwartz contributed $100,000 to congressional Democrats. Schwartz ended up visiting China with Clinton Commerce Secretary Ron Brown, who later was killed in that plane crash I was talking about. In May 1998, Lockheed Martin cooperated with COSAT, that's the Chinese satellite authority, to launch a satellite using the Long March 1 rocket. That's the same rocket that they used, by the way, to deliver ballistic missiles. It's similar to some of the rockets that they ended up shipping to Pakistan. So what are we learning here? So this is the end of part 3. Okay. You saw the stay tuned for part 4. Sorry, let me fix that. Stay tuned for part 4. Um, we'll just show that for a second. There you go. Uh, I had to do that, but um, there's a real problem with um, everything that's been going on here. What are you supposed to do when the national security advisor, who is charged with keeping a lot of these, a lot of these issues in line with, between the Department of Defense and maybe some other departments? There wasn't Homeland Security at the time, but there was Justice. Um, what do you do when all he cares about is facilitating these crimes? Well, there's not much you can do, and Schwartz was later burned, and I think Pinochet is referring to this. But when after September 11th, in an issue that was, I think, unrelated to this, he was caught stealing documents that were, he was supposed to read them under guard, and they related to Clinton intelligence failures in the 90s. Well, he stole those documents and destroyed them, and he was later convicted, and his law license was removed for doing that. Well, um, the answer is that we now know, and that'll be part of a different book series that I do, that the Clintons basically dragooned the entire U.S. Law enforcement apparatus, the federal law enforcement apparatus, and basically sacrificed them to their own cause, which is them, the cause of the Clintons. So, unfortunately, the damage that's been caused by the Clinton collusion with China is almost irreversible. It is irreversible. There's no way that you can remove that nuclear capability from Pakistan because they have it. It's a fact that's been established thanks to the stupidity and lack of seriousness of U.S. foreign policy and defense policy in the 90s, which was, because of campaign donations. Think about it this way. If you're an Indian citizen, okay, if you're somebody watching from India, and maybe you should share this with somebody from India who might care. The reason your country might be under threat of nuclear war with Pakistan, even though India also has nuclear weapons, is partially because of the neglect of people like Sandy Berger and Bill Perry, these U.S. defense officials, and their neglect was caused by the attitude of the Clintons and Al Gore, who's also very deeply embroiled in this scandal. It's not just Bill Clinton; it's Al Gore as well. It's also some members of the DNC at the time. They overruled Doug Fowler, who was the chair of the DNC. So you're talking about a deep rot within the political system of the U.S. in the 90s that has allowed the threat of nuclear war to get worse in the post-Cold War era. I think people, when Bill Clinton came to power, the last thing on their minds was the possibility that a new nuclear war could break out because the Soviet Union had collapsed already. People thought, well, there was the end of history, the Francis Fukuyama book. But in reality, that dream of a world peace that was achieved without, a hot war was made into an illusion by their greed and their corruption. Okay, now there was also the threat of a terrorist nuclear bomb. That was a legitimate threat that people couldn't have predicted during the Cold War. But the idea that the Clintons would facilitate the fact that Pakistan is now a nuclear state, a nuclear power, just because they could care less what China was doing with the technology that they were stealing from the United States. They were stealing or they were buying. There were certain things that even I'm pretty much a small government conservative. I don't, to some degree, a libertarian. I don't believe that the U.S. should intervene in the private sector unless absolutely necessary. This is a case where I think it might have been necessary. I mean, I do think it was necessary. Why should Loral and Hughes have been so crucial in perfecting ballistic missile technology for the Chinese government? You know, there's no explanation for that. Pinochet says Hughes was a great American company and the last of the stalwarts of World War II. Yeah, I think by then they'd been bought out a couple times. But this is it. I hope that you spread this video, or at least talk about this video with other people. You know, talk about the content, bring some people in. Maybe if you know some other content creators, let them know about this. Maybe they can host me. We can have a chat about it. It's pretty important because you know, like I said, real collusion. It doesn't get more real than this. So that's it. It's Ramon, Bold Like a Leopard, Year of the Rat, Part 3. That's real collusion. And have a great Monday morning.